Welcome back to another episode of the Jacob Johnston Show. I know. Biden gave his first State of the Union address, and I'm supposed to cover it, but I'm not going to. The State of the Union is a completely pointless exercise. It's just a political speech with a captive audience. At least with Trump, we tuned in because we were looking for some entertainment. Now, and Trump, had a way of just telling the unbridled truth, providing actual facts, and providing, relevant stories. We know that when it comes to the Democrats, they have no basis in reality, so they're going to talk about a bunch of, delusions, their, socialist agenda. They're going to attack the country, attack the police, and basically try and convince us of why we need to give up our rights and our liberty. We also know that Biden's going to try and take credit for the coronavirus vaccines, even though all of that was under Trump. And even at that, the Democrats are trying to say that even with a vaccine, you still can't get your liberties back and you still need to wear a mask. So, no, I'm not going to cover it. Now, in the last episode, I was covering about how Biden's first 100 days has been a complete and total dumpster fire. And things continue to get worse. As always with the Democrats, it's mass corruption and abuse of power. But first, with Trump not in the news and Trump deplatformed from social media, the Democrats don't really have much to go on to try and attack Trump with. Now, Trump's, having only served one term in office, still had one of the most successful presidencies in modern history of the United States. People were prospering. People were rising out of poverty. We had historic low unemployment. We had brought back leadership to the world, and we were on the verge of bringing back peace to the Middle East. And all of that's gone now. I mean, there is absolutely zero leadership coming from the United States. But the Democrats, they need to find a way to get Trump back into the news. Because, well, people like Trump. Now, the left likes to hate him. Nobody gives a rip about Biden other than the fact that he is a fraud in the White House. And we all know what Biden is all about. He's going to try and, stay off camera as much as possible while he's attacking the country. What was that? Quiet or slow but radical. Just basically try to stay out of the news while implementing the most radical anti-American agenda possible. But the left needs to find a way to bolster support for Biden, who has virtually no support in the country. He's not interested in unity. He's not bringing the country together. He is dividing the country. But the left needs to try and find a way to prop Biden up, to try and make it seem like he's more popular than what he is. I mean, the left in the left-wing media are masters of illusion. And one of the ways that they're doing that is trying to claim that Trump's popularity and support is declining. Take a look at this.
A new NBC News poll shows Donald Trump's favorability rating among adults at only 32%. That's significantly down from his rating back in January. Then it was 40% favorable among registered voters.
Now, of course, there are a lot of things wrong with this particular polling. One, it's an NBC poll. So let me get this straight. You have a completely political left-leaning organization that's been running fake news and propaganda for years, promoting every left-wing conspiracy theory, coming out with a poll that basically goes off to tell their viewers exactly what NBC has been trying to convince people of. Geez, I wonder what could be the problem with the poll. I mean, we all know what's going on with these polls. During elections, they run polls all the time, not to inform people of what everybody's thinking, but to try and tell you what to think. Suppression polls, where they come up with fake polling information, manipulated polls, and all of that to try and convince you that if you don't agree with the left, you're in the minority. And so they're trying to tell you that Trump's approval ratings have gone down since he left office. Let's see here. Trump's not in the news. Trump is not on social media. You know, it's hard to see or hear anything from Trump these days. Since leaving office, everything has gone to hell in a handbasket under his successor, who has the lowest or the third lowest approval rating of any presidency at this point in their term. And yet everything was going great under Trump, and then the coronavirus hit, and then he provided the most successful leadership ever and leaves office, forced out as Biden seized office. And then his successor comes in. It's a complete dumpster fire, and a bunch of, just radical left agenda that people don't agree with. And we're supposed to believe that Trump's approval ratings have declined? That somehow people love a dumpster fire? People love the suffering and misery that is occurring under Biden? And people hated prosperity, lifting out of poverty, and winding down wars? So, I mean, it makes no sense. Of course it doesn't make sense. This NBC poll is not designed to make sense. It's just there to try and convince you that Trump's support is going down, regardless of the fact that it's not, and trying to convince you that Biden is somehow more popular. It's just basically going off and trying to convince you that if you are still, against Biden, understand that Biden's occupancy, was and what had happened in the 2020 election, that you're in the minority. See, this is what the left does all the time. They try to go off and make you feel isolated. And fake polling is a great way to make you feel isolated. Now, of course, maybe they could say their polling was legitimate, but it was only based off of maybe their viewers, which is obviously all a bunch of left-wing know-nothings. But in any event, they try to go off and they try to isolate you. This is a tactic of radical authoritarians. They try to isolate you. You're not allowed to talk about things on social media, or you're going to be deplatformed and banned. You're not allowed to, really discuss anything that had happened. Then you are not only are you not able to go off and talk about it, but you're not able to hear what other people are saying, thinking, or what they have discovered about it. So already you're starting to feel alone. And then they come up with these polls designed to make you think that most people disagree with you. Therefore, there's something wrong with your thinking. You're in the minority, which does what? It further makes you feel isolated, which means it's also designed to prevent you to just from rising up and instead rolling over and taking the corruption, rolling over and taking the overthrow of the Constitution and the ousting of democracy. That's what these polls are really about. They're there to tell you what to think and to convince you to give up the fight for the restoration of the Constitution and democracy in the United States. And you know what? Psychologically, I'm sure this is pretty effective. I mean, we have 100 days of Biden's illegitimate occupation of the White House. Not really a whole lot of uprising because everyone's, being isolated and prevented from being able to talk about what happened. And yeah, but we're supposed to believe that one of the most successful pro-American presidents in modern history that did so much to raise this country up and help lift people out of poverty and did so much to bring jobs back to the country is somehow declining in approval ratings post-presidency while his successor has been a complete dumpster fire. Yeah. If you are also thinking, yeah, there's probably something wrong with these polls, or you're questioning the legitimacy of these polls, yeah, you're questioning them for good reasons. Okay. So, in any event, So 100 days in office and a complete dumpster fire. Well, we also now have back in our return to normalcy, normalcy. We now have back the government targeting of political opponents. Take a look.
Now have confirmed the breaking news from the New York Times. Jonathan Dienst, NBC's Jonathan Dienst in New York, saying that federal investigators have executed that search warrant at the apartment owned by the former personal attorney to President Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani. Part of an investigation into Mr. Giuliani's dealings in Ukraine. Joining me by phone is Michael Schmidt from the New York Times that broke this story. Michael, can you explain where they are on this investigation and how unusual it would be to have a search warrant at the former president's attorney's apartment?
Yes, that's right. We're now using the FBI and intelligence community once again to target the political opponents of the Democrats. Yes, this is the return to normalcy. So this isn't much different. Actually, if anything, it's only an escalation to the abuse of power that we saw under Obama-Biden. So we have the federal government targeting the attorney of Trump. Now, remember, this isn't the first attorney that Trump had employed that the Democrats had targeted. Now, is it possible that this is a Michael Cohen situation where, Giuliani was doing something, separate from Trump? Just going out on his own? Maybe. They went after Cohen even, for what? Taxi medallions? Something, but they tried justifying it and doing the initial targeting because they were trying to go after Trump. Now, with Giuliani, they're trying to say about his dealings in Ukraine. Geez, that's kind of funny. That is actually funny. So there was no investigation, no raids, and no arrest for the Democrats' illegal spying operation, where the Democrats paid a person to make up a bunch of bogus information and call it a dossier, then circulate it throughout the government, so that multiple agencies would be feeding it to the FBI, and then have the FBI hire the same person that the Democrats hired in order to try and corroborate his own fake dossier as if he was a separate source. And they went on with this, and it escalated all the way to a special counsel probe. So the Democrats manufactured a conspiracy theory, paid someone to put together a dossier in order to justify illegally spying on the Trump campaign, and fed some of the information that they got to the Clinton campaign. And then when he gets into office, yes, they get the special counsel probe designed to cover up their initial crime in order to try and target and derail President Trump. But no one was ever arrested, prosecuted, or investigated for that. Another thing here that is interesting is Hunter Biden. Okay, remember Hunter Biden's laptop, which also had to deal with Ukraine, influence peddling, accepting a position for which he had no qualifications for, to get paid large sums of money for doing basically nothing, so that the Ukrainian gas company can get favors from Joe Biden. Favors like getting a prosecutor fired and removed from their position for investigating the gas company Burisma's illegal dealings. Right? But again, no investigations, no arrests, no search warrants. Right? Even though you got a proven crime there. But what do they decide to investigate? What do they decide to execute a search warrant? The former president's personal attorney looking into the illegal actions of the Democrats. Yes, so the Democrats engaged in so many crimes, so many illegal actions, so much abuse of power, nothing happens. You get someone investigating that, and the investigator, now Giuliani was investigating as a private citizen and personal attorney, right? But he's going off investigating that, trying to collect the evidence of what the Democrats did, even though we have, undeniable boatloads of evidence already. But Giuliani went on to investigate that, try to get evidence or more evidence. But he should have realized it doesn't matter how much evidence you have. The Democrats have declared themselves exempt from any laws whatsoever. And so they go after Giuliani. Maybe it's because Giuliani finally got the, dozenth smoking gun evidence and was getting ready to release it. And the Democrats needed to go in and engage in a cover-up before he got it released. Maybe it was something so horrible that Biden, Harris, even with a Democrat-controlled House and Senate, could not possibly survive. And it could have possibly implicated Nancy Pelosi. Who knows? But the Democrats needed to seize the evidence, before, it got released, if he got the evidence. Now, let's say Giuliani didn't get any evidence beyond what was already disclosed, which was already, about half a dozen crimes, if not a dozen crimes. All right, well, then this is about signaling, hey, don't you dare look into Democrat corruption. Don't you dare investigate the crimes of the Hunter Biden crime family. Don't you dare look into any of that. See, the Democrats can engage in any crime that they want, but they have decided it is a crime to investigate the Democrats for their crime. So, you understand the complete and total hypocrisy of the Democrats' position or justification in trying to go after Giuliani. Not that the left actually cares about the tyranny, the corruption, and the abuse of power. They cheer it on because right now they believe it's benefiting them. And you don't expect the media to actually go out there and hold anybody accountable on the left for their crimes and illegal actions. No, they're not. They're going to go, yes, they're going to ignore what Hunter Biden did. They're going to ignore all the crimes of the Biden crime family, just like they ignored all the crimes committed by Obama and his administration. They're going to ignore that, pretend like it never happened, and then try to say what Giuliani did was illegal and criminal. But what did Giuliani do? Send communications, asking questions, trying to see if they're willing to provide, evidence of what actually happened so that he can use it, presumably, as Trump's lawyer, as part of any defense for the next attack that the left is likely to do. But what was Hunter Biden's excuse? Taking money to sit on a board for which he did nothing and had no qualifications. And upon taking that position and getting that money, having his dad fire a prosecutor looking into that company. No investigations, but you're going to investigate and try and prosecute the person investigating the Biden's criminal dealings. Yeah. I mean, are we really surprised? I mean, look how, under Obama, they used the IRS to target political opponents. They used the FBI, the CIA, all of it. It's just constant, nonstop abuse of power that the Democrats engage in. And why not? If you can get away with it, I guess. And the Democrats have a proven history of being able to get away with any criminal activity they want to get away with. They're never held accountable for their crimes. And so this is just like what we say with Antifa and Black Lives Matter. They engage in domestic terrorism. No consequences. So they escalate in the amount of terrorism they go in. No consequences. So they escalate. And then you get to the point where they're attacking people. They're setting buildings on fire. Doing so while people are still in the building. And even going off and murdering people that show support for Republicans. Who show support for President Trump. and they still do not pay the consequences for it. And so we see them continuing to escalate in their levels of violence and domestic terrorism. Well, the same thing happens on the left. They commit a crime, no consequences. So they commit bigger and bolder crimes, no consequences. Bigger and bolder crimes, no consequences. And now, just like you see in third world dictatorships, the powers and agencies of government is used to openly and blatantly target the political opponents. See, the Democrats, at least under Obama, tried to hide what they were doing. They weren't so blatant and overt. They tried to do it in secret, where it wouldn't be out in the open. They at least tried to cover up their tracks of what they were doing. They failed a lot of the times, but at least they made the effort to try and cover it up. Here with Biden, they got away with the biggest crime of the century, the crime of the last 200 years with what they did in 2020. Now feel like they have a blank check and it doesn't even matter. They don't have to worry about covering up their crimes. They got away with what they did in the 2020 election. They got away with, taking money and from groups of people and exchanging favors, quid pro quos. They got away with that, even though they had all the smoking gun evidence that was ever needed. So why bother covering anything up? They never face the consequences for it. So now they're just going to be blatantly and openly corrupt as they use every agency in government to target any political opponent and anybody who dares try to expose the depths of the crimes in which the Democrats commit. It is just sickening. And then you wonder why they're trying to come up with suppression polls to try and make it look like support for Trump is declining and, people are actually behind or unifying around Biden when no such thing is happening. It's because they want you to roll over and accept the blatant, out of control corruption and abuse of power by these authoritarian third world tyrants that now occupy the White House and have their controls in the House and Senate. But at least there's good news, for 2022, with the Democrats losing congressional seats in, California, New York, and Illinois, while Republican solidly red states are gaining seats, and the congressional map is being redrawn. Now, of course, we know the Democrats are going to try and, challenge the results of the 2020 census. They're going to try and challenge it, and they're going to try and go to some, left-wing nut job sitting on a bench who has no problems ignoring the Constitution, subverting the Constitution, and then try to figure out a way to just declare, California is going to get even more seats, even though much of the seats that they have are illegitimate. But, hey, whatever. Hopefully the Supreme Court will uphold it. And then, of course, we know the Democrats are going to try and challenge all the congressional maps. But you know what? You can't really challenge the congressional maps. Right? The Supreme Court has to uphold the Constitution, and the Constitution gives the authority to determine representation to the states. All right, so they can draw. So in reality, yes, whether we like it or not, they can draw the congressional maps however they want. It doesn't matter. The federal government has no say in it. It's the power of the state legislatures. But luckily, if we take a look at the Democrats' loss of representation, the redrawing of the congressional maps, and the huge backlash that is coming in 2022. And I think, people looking at 2022 and the hopes that, the Republicans will take super majorities and just remove Biden and Harris is the only thing preventing people from taking to the streets in order to take back democracy and restore the Constitution. All right. So, this is just, the Democrats waste no time in blatant corruption, and they are going through and they are attacking everything that they can about the country, hoping to completely eradicate what remains of the Constitution before 2022 hits, so that they can just, complete their overthrow of democracy. All right, now, in addition to suppression polls, the Democrats, they've been, engaging in other tactics in order to get people cheering on the overthrow of democracy, cheering on the, taking away of civil liberties. And they do that through the schools. The schools where they try to go off and teach people to hate the country, hate the Constitution, hate democracy, and try to convince them that such things are a threat to them. And how do they do that? Well, they do that through two things. One is the 1619 Project, and two, the critical race theory.
Republicans in Congress fighting back against the Biden administration's proposal that could boost critical race theory in schools. In a letter to Education Secretary Cardona, they write, our educators should not be encouraging ideologues that undermine the value of individual liberty and America's founding ideals, while further embedding the concept of systemic racism in our children's education, which is Marxism.
Now, we have covered slavery in America's history many times, but I think there are some things that we need to actually cover. First off, slavery wasn't invented by European settlers in the America continent. It was introduced to us. It was a concept introduced to us by non-Europeans. The idea that you could buy and own somebody for life was a foreign concept. Now, there was indentured servants where people agreed to, serve you to pay off debt. If you had paid for their passage somewhere, loan them money, and that is not the same as apprenticeships, right? Which, you could say apprenticeships had some servitude to it, but there was always the expectation that the person would pay off the debt and go out on their own. But the whole idea that you could buy somebody and have them be your servant for life, that was not invented by European settlers. That was introduced by non-Europeans. It was a foreign concept up until that point. And its implementation in the United States was started by non-European. So, this whole 1619 Project trying to claim that, the American colonists, European colonists invented slavery, which, by the way, slavery had been going on for thousands of years among cultures throughout the world. There was slavery in Middle and South America long before the first European settlers stepped foot on this side of the world. But again, it was a foreign concept introduced. And another problem with the 1619 Project was we were not a country in 1619. Not a free country. We were under the rule of the British Crown. We were subjects of the British Crown, having to abide by the laws of the British Crown. Right? You understand that when we declared our independence and fought a revolution, that it was an open rejection of Europe or of Britain. It was an open rejection of the British Crown, of the rules of the British Crown, the authority of the British Crown. So you're trying to go off and then say that something that had started while we were under the authority, jurisdiction, and rule of the British Crown, is the fault of the United States, which wasn't founded until 50 plus years later. I won't do the exact math. 150 plus years later, when we decided, hey, we reject, the rules of the British Crown. You understand. You can't say that, that it was America's original sin when it started off 150 years before the United States was a country and became a country by rejecting the authority of the British Crown. And then you're trying to blame white Europeans for something that was introduced to them by non-Europeans. All right, but the Democrats want to push the 1619 Project, and they want to push critical race theory because they're trying to recreate the Hitler Youth Program. I mean, it is amazing how all these decades later, 90 years later, 80 years later, that the left is still trying to create and bring forth Hitler's vision. Although they try to claim that it's not Hitler, even though it's everything that Hitler was trying to do. They even have the anti-Semitism. They have their genocide going on through the abortion clinics, and they're trying to implement the policies of Hitler, including the Hitler Youth Program, where they're trying to indoctrinate. But in this particular situation, they're trying to use the school system to indoctrinate kids to hate the country, to see the Constitution and the guarantee of individual liberties as evil, hateful, and racist. The idea of a small, limited government that has a very small presence in your life as somehow authoritarian, but yet a government in which, dictates what rights you do and don't have, on a whim, constantly changing, who has an influence over every aspect of your life they're trying to convince is somehow freedom and liberty. It's completely backwards. But they want to teach people to hate the country, hate the Constitution, so that they'll support the overthrow of the Constitution and the government. They're indoctrinating hate, but they're coupling that, with their revisionist history with critical race theory, which is a racist indoctrination that tries to blame a whole group of people for the actions of a small, a fraction of a percent of individuals. Right? Individuals, by the way, that are, that of that small fraction is majority Democrat. But they're trying to go off and do that. And then they want to, and just like they're trying to say authoritarian is freedom and freedom is authoritarian, they're now trying to go off and say being racist is actually anti-racist. So they're teaching hate for country, hate for your fellow citizens, and then trying to convince you that that is peace and tolerance. It is just sickening what the Democrats have done. It is. It's they say violence is peace and peace is violence. Hate is tolerance and tolerance is hate. Freedom is authoritarian is freedom. They basically flip-flop everything upside down to be the exact opposite of what it actually is. And if you can do that, through the school system, starting off, in say preschool, then it creates an indoctrination, especially when you ban any open and disagreement, when you prevent any debate and you censor everything so that they can't actually, see other opinions and realize very quickly that what the schools are pushing is complete illogical BS. They can only keep this level of indoctrination in place so long as they get rid of free speech, free and open debate. Punish those that question them, that ask basic questions. Because truth and logic eventually take root and will always overcome indoctrination, unless you can block anybody from getting access to such information. But yeah, they just, and as far as teaching hate and racism, they like to target a very specific group. Right? And it's no surprise, it's no mystery what group that they are targeting. They're targeting minorities. They're trying to teach them to be fearful, to have a victimhood mentality, teach them that the only way that they're going to be able to survive is based off of the table scraps of the Democrat Party. Teach them to hate anybody who doesn't look like them and justify that hate by trying to convince them that they're victims. It's the Hitler Youth Program, all aimed at being able to raise a generation that would support ending our rights, liberties, and freedoms and democracy in the United States. This is a large part of the reason why I have pulled my kids out of the public education system. When we first put our kids into the school, our school system was rated, the best in the state. It was supposed to be one of the best education systems, and it's why we stayed in the area, even though we disagree with much of the politics. Because we wanted to provide the best educational opportunities for our kids. But, after we had enrolled our kids in school, what had happened is over the years, the education had severely declined. They started abandoning education, science, facts, and math, and pushing left-wing agendas, left-wing hate, teaching kids to hate other kids based off of the color of their skin for something that happened 100 plus years ago. Something that had happened long before they were born, and the people preaching it are on the side of those who committed the atrocities, but then trying to use that to preach hate. And now we see in the school system that the kids can't even tell, the difference between a boy and a girl, a very basic fact, biological, and scientific based distinction, and they can't tell it. So we pulled our kids out of the radical left school system, brought them home, and what has happened? Their reading skills have improved. Their math skills have drastically improved. We're able to teach them actual science, and we're actually able to have fun teaching them science. We got these kits, and that goes through these home science kits, and we're able to have a lot of fun with it, which means they retain the knowledge more. And we go through history class, and of course, when it comes to history class, I'm going to go off and share much of what I know about history. Part of what I'm going to be doing with my kids is I'm putting together, my own class on history over how left-wing propaganda and indoctrination works. Lie a lot, lie big, lie often, censor any opposing views, and then use threats of violence and intimidation to suppress open debate. There's plenty of videos and evidence and all that has come out over the last, 6 years and such that will go through that, but they're not going to be taught the 1619 BS, because that's not actual history. That's revisionist history. And they're not going to be taught the racist, teachings of critical race theory. But for the most part, we're going to focus a lot on the core basics and, of course, computer and computer science. But we also get to enjoy greater expanded education. They're already learning about economics, and this is at elementary levels. And, we're going to also go through, me being a history buff as well, I'm going to be teaching ancient history as well. I really can't wait until they're old enough to be able to understand, the Greek mythologies, the Greek gods, the Norse gods, and, the history of all of that. Have a lot of fun with it. But the whole point as we get to all of this is their reading, math, their reading skills, reading comprehension skills, math skills, and knowledge of science has vastly improved since we took them out of the public school and did homeschooling. And it's the teacherstreehouse.com that we use. They provide lesson plans. They provide, links to the videos, the PowerPoints, worksheets, tests, a way to keep track of their grading and how they are doing. They do all of that. All you got to do is follow the plan. You just got to select what classes you want to teach your kids. And here in my state, the state is completely hands off. They just, say, hey, just make sure you at least teach them the stems. Now, I know in other states, the state is more involved. I get that. But you get to select the classes, what you think is most relevant, and what you think would also be more entertaining and rounding it out. There's going to be a lot more in philosophy as well. But, and it doesn't take as long or as much effort to do the teaching as you think, because you're giving them one-on-one attention, right? You're not waiting around for 30 other kids to understand, get done, and wait for them to catch up. You only need to stick to a lesson long enough for your kids to actually have grasped, learned, and comprehended what they have, and then you use regular testing for that to figure out what you need to continue focusing on and what you can move on. It is great. It's actually proven to be much superior to the public school system, because the public school system no longer focuses on education, facts, and science. Instead, they push indoctrination, anti-science. They are trying to create a bunch of mindless sheeps that will regurgitate the support for the desires of left-wing elitists who just want to rig the system and rule the country. Okay, here. And so as we go through here and we see all the people, that, and I'm recording this before we get to Biden's first State of the Union, everyone's already trying to pre-position this. You got a lot of people trying to say, Joe Biden it's going to be the greatest speech ever. Right? But one of the things that you're going to hear from the State of the Union by all the left-wing hacks is, this was a unifying speech. Joe Biden, he is such a unifier. He is bringing the country together, when the reality is the exact opposite is true. Joe Biden is a divider. It was, ironically, as much as the left hated Trump, Trump was actually unifying the country. But Joe Biden is a divider. He's divisive, and he's 100% only concerned about catering to the far left extremists attacking this country. And you know what? Even the left, in the White House, can't seem to find the right set of BS in order to justify Joe Biden's actions. And they can't even find not one example where Joe Biden has done anything to unify the country. So here is the White House trying to dodge questions on unity in this country.
Has not met with House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, according to Kevin McCarthy. And so there's a lot of folks, you talk about tens of millions of people, they're concerned about that this doesn't seem like unity at all.
Do you think tens of millions of people are concerned about him not meeting with Kevin McCarthy?
No, I think tens of millions of people are concerned about H.R. 1 and budget reconciliation and going with that 50 vote threshold. I think
I'm
that was
not
a
sure
concern.
the polling bears that out, but I will say that the president's view is that bringing the country together is bringing the American people together.
Now, this is a tactic that is often used by the left, trying to say, well, we have the support of the American people. Based off of what, though? By what are they making that claim? They always try to go off and try and say that Congress needs to do whatever the Democrats say because the Democrats have the support of the people. No, you don't. You understand that this is a representational republic, that the people that serve in the House and the Senate, and I know this is a foreign concept to the Democrats, are elected to represent the people, and that the people that run for those offices, right, campaign off of ideas of what they want to do if they get there. Now, I think the whole idea of campaign platforms is stupid because, well, you're not there to serve yourself. You're there to serve the people. Your platform should be, I will meet with you, hear what you want, and then represent that in DC, not here's what I want to do if I get into office. But in any event, we elect our representatives, right? So unifying the country means finding a bipartisanship and unity within the House and Senate. But, the Democrats, they don't seem to understand that. By rejecting our elected representatives, you are rejecting our views. Now, of course, the Democrats have this view where, the House and Senate representatives, are not there to serve the people, but are there to rule over the people. I mean, they got it backwards. But trying to go off and say that you're going to ignore the people we sent there to represent our views and interests, and then claim that you're going to bypass them to go and have support of the people is just a bunch of delusional garbage. I mean, yes, I get it. Democrats are in office. They don't understand that they're there to represent people instead of rule over them, but they still have to get elected, which means there's somebody, and I can't figure out how, that agrees with them. Now, they try to get around that. They try to rig the systems. They try to, gain additional congressional seats by any illegitimate means that they can, i.e., counting the population of illegal immigrants in order to bolster their population and state representation. I mean, I get that. There's a whole lot of things that go with that. But at some point, for some of them, they still had to get elected, right? Which means that enough people agreed with them, at least more so than their political opponent, to put them into office. And so you going off and saying, I'm going to ignore your representatives, but don't worry, this just means I represent you. I want your elected representative to bow to my wishes. And, they don't represent you, but I know you support me. You don't support your representative, you support me. Therefore, your representative needs to bow down to me, and whatever I demand. I mean, you understand that's what they're basically trying to say here. But this whole, claim that, Biden is unifying the people. Well, I guess that kind of depends on who he defines as the people. If he's defining anybody who doesn't agree with the far left as non-people, then sure, he's unifying the far left. But he's completely disunifying or dividing the rest of the country. He has been very divisive among independents, definitely among the right, and there's plenty on the left that are going, hey, you're going way too far here. But see, they make this whole claim that what I'm doing is unifying the people, but they have nothing to back it up. It's like that, how they try to build up fake credibility by, appealing to an authority, and only in this case, the authority doesn't exist. Well, in this case, they're trying to appeal to an authority that they can't provide any evidence actually supports what it is they're claiming. It's just a way to be dismissive. It's just a way to ignore questions. It's just a way to justify doing something that has very bad results, ends up in disaster. But it's just a way to get around questions. It's just a way to say, hey, sit down and shut up. They're trying to appeal that they have the support of the people without being able to provide any evidence that they have any such support. In fact, I'd say to the contrary, all the evidence is the exact opposite of what they claim. Joe Biden's piss poor approval ratings, the third worst in modern history, or in the history of polling. The third worst approval rating of any presidency at this point. But they tried to ask questions about unity, and they couldn't figure out one thing that he has done. They couldn't provide one example of anything he's done that has been bringing people together or unifying the country. So they try to go off and dismiss meeting with anybody across the aisle and trying to say that, we're unifying the people, not Congress. You understand that in the end, he's just basically going, I am a complete and total partisan. I have no interest in reaching across the aisle or doing anything in a bipartisan fashion. How Joe Biden has defined unity is he's going to ram things down your throat and you just need to roll over and take it. That's what he has declared to be his definition of unity. Just ramming down everything without any support from the other side. Divider in chief. And you know what? I am surprised. I didn't think anybody could be more divisive, more partisan, more authoritarian than what Obama was. But you know what? Biden, having been the vice president, you can say he was the student, and now he's become a master in pushing racism, division, and hate in this country. Whether or not we can survive, this, I don't know. I hope there's a way that the country can survive, but for all indications are we're on a collision course for major disaster. All right. So anyways, that's it for this particular episode. I'd like to thank you for watching if you're watching the video, or listening if you are getting the audio podcast of this. Obviously you're more likely to be watching on Rumble and BitChute, but if you found this on YouTube, hey, let others know how you got past all of the censorship. All right. Don't forget to ensure that you follow me by hitting that subscribe button. By now you should know subscribe doesn't mean anything other than follow. Doesn't cost you anything. Leave me ratings, reviews, thumbs up, comments. Share this around. Of course, I'm on Parler. I'm on Gab. I'm on Minds. I found a way to get back up on MeWe. I had to create another page for that. You can find me all over there if you enjoy platforms that provide free speech. If you enjoy the challenge of trying to find, this show through the heavy censorship, you can also catch me on Twitter and Facebook. I don't really post anything there except for links to the show and whatever else I have set to auto post over there from where I post elsewhere. All right. Thank you so much. And of course, I will be back again soon.